Hi guys, so I'm here today to do my DiverseAthon reading wrap up. This is an extra wrap up for the month because I took part in the DiverseAthon readathon, which was started by 4 phenomenal booktubers whose channels I will obviously link down below, and I highly recommend you go and check them all out. But essentially they decided to create a readathon to promote reading diversely. So reading the voices that don't get as much attention despite the fact that they are everywhere in reality. Let's be honest, if you read a list of top 100 books to read in a lifetime, or you go into a bookshop and look at their window display, you're going to come across predominantly white, straight characters and authors. Thankfully, that is not the world we live in though. So I was so thrilled that the DiverseAthon was created, because I know myself that my reading isn't nearly as diverse as it needs to be, because those are the books that are sold to me, and if I'm lazy and don't make an effort to look outside of that, then that's what I'm gonna get. All of the straight, white, cisgendered, able-bodied people. And that's not what I want from my readings. So this readathon definitely encouraged me to make a conscious effort, because I think sometimes even when we feel like we're reading diversely, when we break things down, it's actually a much smaller percentage of what we read that is falling outside of that group. I didn't do a TBR for this readathon because I honestly didn't think I'd be able to read more than one book. It's just been a busy week, you know, I've started a new job, I'm trying to prepare some stuff for my PhD, and yeah, it's just been really busy. So I planned on reading I Am Malala, but there seemed like no point in really doing a TBR for one book, especially given that I'd included that in my monthly TBR. However, I Am Malala, which was the first book I read, turned out to be such a enthralling, quick read that I finished it within 3 days and had tons of time to fit in some more diverse reading. So I did, and I'm so pleased with how much I managed to read, especially given how busy I was, the quality of what I read, and I think what is very important is the reminder for me to continue the DiverseAthon every day. I am going to make a real conscious effort to keep the diversity in my reading, and I think that was the purpose of this readathon. It's not just a trend diversity, it's not just about fitting in something a little bit different for a week in your year. It's about reassessing our reading habits, the publishing industry, and just society in general. But this is meant to be a wrap up, so I will get back to the books. Like I said, I read I Am Malala first, and that's a non-fiction book about Malala, who is a Pakistani girl who fought for education in her country and was shot by the Taliban. The non-fiction book tells the story from her childhood up until she was about 15, which is when she is shot, her education, her family, and the fight for education that she takes part in. And then we get to see what happens after her shooting, and she's only around 18 or 19 now, so she's done a lot for such a young woman, but a lot of amazing things, and I found this book incredibly inspirational, and I'm so glad I finally picked it up. It was also the read for the Feminist Orchestra book club this month, and it was picked by the group members, and I'm so glad that it was. But I have already filmed a whole video about this book, so that will be going up in a couple of days, so I'll say no more here, but positive beginning to the readathon. Next up, I listened to on audiobook Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. I'm finding I'm listening to audiobooks so much quicker now that I'm in London because they're so useful to fit in when I'm walking and on the underground. So yeah, I'm speeding through audiobooks. If you have any non-fiction audiobook recommendations, please do let me know, because that's what I'm enjoying listening to the most at the moment and need some more recommendations. But Bad Feminist is another one that actually exceeded my expectations. So I'd heard a lot that this essay collection, which is what this is, wasn't really about feminism, and that a few of the essays were about feminism and gender, but they were interspersed with, if not overwhelmed by, essays on different topics. Or at least that's what I had in my head, because people had told me they weren't all about feminism. However, more of them were about gender and feminism than I was actually anticipating, and more than that, most of them were on social justice issues. So there was a couple, personally, that I didn't really think fitted into the collection. I get that if it is marketed as a memoir, it's just Roxane Gay trying to summarise things that have impacted her life, so sure, she includes an essay on Scrabble, and that's fair enough, but I don't think the book is marketed as a memoir, so I think there was a few essays that were out of place. They didn't really add anything to the collection, but literally only two that I can remember. Other than that, I thought they were really interesting essays. A lot of them were commentaries on television and film and literature, so I'm sure a lot of you will be interested in that. And although not all of them were about gender and feminism, a lot of them were also about race, and then a lot of them compounded to be about both of those topics and be about black women and their relationship with feminism and just, you know, the extra discrimination that they face. And I just thought it was a really interesting collection. I really thought Roxane Gay, again, is somebody who has a very strong voice that is consistent throughout these essays. They string together well, and I agreed with most of the things she said. I definitely had some yes moments in there, and altogether was quite happy reading this one, and it just got better and better as it went on, so I would actually really recommend this one. Next up, I actually read a short story, and that was Sultana's Dream by Rokeya Sakawat Hossain. This short story was written in the early 1900s, and I read it right after I Am Malala, and I'm so pleased I did, because the short story on my Kindle opened with a little bit of a backstory to the author, and it turns out she was another feminist Muslim woman who fought for her girls' education in her country. I think she is Bengali, and I really enjoyed this little short story. It was very short. It is one of the earliest feminist utopians, and it's just about a woman who falls asleep and in a sort of dreamland ends up in a world that is basically the reverse of her society, where women roam freely and men's roles in society are restricted. And it was very interesting, and I think it's really interesting to read such an early example of a kind of exploration of gender roles and feminism and utopians. So for that, it was a really interesting reading experience, and I think the short story cost me like 99p on the Kindle. I think it's a kind of short story you could totally unpack with some heavy analytics as well if you were studying it. It's a very quick reading experience. I read it in like 10-15 minutes, so not a lot there to actually read, but really interesting if that's something you'd like to learn a little bit more about and get an early example of that kind of stories. And the last book I'm not actually finished, but it is Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi, and I am loving this book. I have been meaning to read something by Helen Oyeyemi for the longest time, and I am so glad I finally did, and I'm really glad I started with this one. I think I first heard about this book on Rosianna's channel. She may even have a review of it, so I'll link it down below if I can find it. It's a real world tale inspired by Snow White, where our protagonist kind of fills the role of the evil stepmother. She runs away from home at about age 19 or 20 because her father is quite abusive, and ends up in a town where she doesn't know anybody and meets a man who she marries who has a daughter called Snow, and there she becomes the stepmother. And the writing in this book is off the wall. It is beautiful, and I am going to be devouring more Helen Oyeyemi as soon as I'm finished with this one because her prose are so stunning. And like I said, I haven't finished this one, but from what I've read so far and from reading reviews and plot introductions online, I believe this one definitely does deal with race relations, because some of the main characters are actually African Americans passing for white people, and when people realise that they're not actually white, the way they react towards them. I haven't got into that bit yet, but my expectations for the rest of the story based on what I've read so far are incredibly high, but I think will be met because I'm just so enjoying this story, and yeah, so glad I picked it up. And I'll probably finish it in the next couple of days, so you'll hear more about it in my monthly wrap up at the end of September. I had initially planned on turning this wrap up into a wrap up / recommendations video where I recommended to you some other books that you might want to check out to continue your DiverseAthon journey into the future, but I think this video is long enough as it is. But if you'd like to see a separate video on that topic, then do let me know. I do already have a LGBTQ+ recommendations video, which I'll link down below. That's an underrepresented group of people in literature that are very close to my heart, but there is still so much more that I know I need to read, so if you have any recommendations, then please do let me know. And if you read anything particularly fabulous this week, then also let me know. But there's going to be loads of links down below to YouTube channels and recommendations videos, so please do look into those whilst you're here. And until next time guys, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye!